you think this is going to play out on the world global stage. Economic growth is inherently destructive. It comprises asset stripping the planet and despoiling it with our waste, and being competitive means doing it faster than anybody else. And that's not happening in a vacuum. It's happening because politically, at a grassroots level, we indirectly demand it. There's a bit of cognitive dissonance about it, isn't there, in that we abhor environmental destruction, but we all want the products of it.
Yeah.
So, with that in mind, and given that markets evolve, if this piece of legislation makes it, isn't that then going to unleash a plethora of applications for this or that activity to be deemed not within the definition of ecocide? This is too nebulous a concept.
This is why it's really important that it's kept in the public demand, but also because of the drafting, it doesn't do a checklist of what is or isn't ecocide. That would be tantamount to disaster. And in fact, crimes of aggression made that huge mistake when it was being drafted and tabled in Kampala in 2010. It was a checklist of what constituted a crime of aggression, the run-up to war, the use of this warfare and that and what have you. And it ended up being a bartering stick. We'll put this in, but we won't put that in. Ecocide law isn't drafted in that way. It's drafted so that you have parameters of significant harm. It doesn't matter what the industry is called, it's whether or not it's the harm. So it's an evaluation of harm itself within certain parameters. It's the size, duration, impact test, a disjunctive test that's already been set out under the Environmental Modification Convention. So it's actually very hard to argue for a different test because we already use the NMOD test during wartime. And I'm saying that we should be using it during peacetime. But the biggest way we can protect this is to make sure it remains in the public domain. Because it isn't a checklist. Many times in the past, in fact, we've had change happening without it coming from the electorate. Genocide was not put in because the public voted for it. It didn't come from the public domain, actually. It came from within a system where you had enough people saying, we have to close the door to this now because it's so dangerous for humanity as a whole. International crimes were not put in there because the electorate called for it, actually. It came from, initially it started with one lawyer, Raphael Lemkin, and him banging the drum for a genocide. So there are many examples in history where it's happened in a different way. It doesn't have to be that route. I'm calling on the route from actually the public domain to give this extra support, because I'm already getting the route the other way, but I want to keep it out in the public domain so that we get the resilience from both systems. I think democracy means the control of the people now. I don't think we have true democracy anymore. I'm not a great believer in what we now perceive to be democracy. I'm a great believer in sociocracy, which is a far more decentralised, collaborative approach to decision making. But amendment to the Rome Statute is actually a very fast-track route where I need one head of state to go big on this and create the safe space. And that's what I'm creating, that's what I'm working with. But you know what? We won't know until we give it a try.
Greetings, Gloucestershire and Herefordshire. We came down yesterday from Lancashire, and there's some more coming on their way to join us. When it comes to fracking, there is no end to your shire and start to ours. It's all one air, one water. And so we hope as we'll come and stand with you, that when it comes time, maybe you'll journey up to us as well. We've had the privilege as nanas of travelling all over the country, touring all the local anti-fracking groups. I can tell you there is nothing but scenes like this throughout the country. Just really beautiful, lovely local people coming together and finding their sense of community there. You know, one of the reporters once asked, you know, what do you think of your community? And one of the locals said, well, we are a community. Before we were just neighbours. Now we stand together to defend our community against a threat to the health of our young. And I think it's been an amazing thing that you've pulled together today. And I will say that after 5 years of fighting this, I can't think of a better setting, although don't tell the other shires, but this is a really beautiful place to be.
So Polly, what is ecocide?
Ecocide is the extensive damage, destruction to or loss of ecosystems. What I've done is I've given a legal definition to the word. The word itself has been around since actually the late 1960s. But what I've done is I've taken it into the United Nations back in 2010 and proposed that it becomes an international crime to criminalise mass damage and destruction.
You were saying earlier that it almost made it onto the international statute books back in 1996, but was scuppered by a small number of nations who had vested interests in preventing its successful passage. Can you tell us a bit about that? You know, who were these countries, what they had to gain, and why the other signatories apparently went along with it?
Well, the problem is that we only know so much from the records that we've now discovered in the United Nations basement. But what we do know from those records, and this is records of meetings, minutes that were taken, and also records from the UN rapporteurs who were involved at the time, is that in the drafting of the Rome Statute for a period of 11 years, there were 5 international crimes that were being drafted in there: genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, crimes of aggression, which is the run-up to war, and ecocide. I didn't know this when I proposed it into the United Nations, but we've now found documentation. And what we also discovered was that there was a meeting in 1996 for the then Working Group on Crimes Against the Environment, where it was announced by the head of the working group that ecocide was going to be removed. Now, no reasons were given, and actually a number of member states complained and flagged up that this should not be removed without any good reason or even debate, because many countries had gone on record as supporting it. But that didn't happen, and it was removed, and in fact that working group was closed down. And this is the problem, is that everything happens behind closed doors, and so there was no recourse. And we do know from the records that 4 countries had lobbied behind the scenes, and that was United States, United Kingdom, France and the Netherlands. And we know from the records and the opinion of the UN rapporteurs at the time that this was vested business interest and political interest, because it would have potentially adverse impact for industries such as genetic modification and nuclear weaponry, nuclear waste from nuclear energy, for the oil industry and for mining industry as well. So, which is indeed probably the case. But nevertheless, what we're seeing here is now we're bringing to light the whole background that was there that actually stopped something as momentous and as an international crime being put in place just purely because of lobbying from 4 member states. And what I'm doing this time is keeping this out in the public domain so that that never happens again.
So going forward, what are your objectives?
You know, we have a shrinking window of opportunity, and we have a shrinking democratic space. So this is about moving fast. This is about getting this tabled this year, now. But I can't perform miracles. This is also about inviting others to come on board at all different levels. This isn't something that's to be kept behind closed doors at a political level. This is to be kept out in the public domain, and that means actually getting public engagement as well. So that's very important, because this is something about finding those who have strong moral radars in whatever sphere of life it is to help come on board, to really take this out and make it visible. Here's a legal route path that can solve a lot of our problems and move us forward into a very different trajectory to move forward, not just here and now, but for future generations. So, I mean, you know, in a way, this is about, you know, necessity of action here and now, and inviting others to engage in whatever way or capacity that's possible. I always look to the abolition of slavery and how that took many different actors and many different spheres and many different levels of life to help engage in it, to really bring that to an end. And I think we're dealing with something equally momentous here. So please help me make it happen.
So doing nothing is not an option.
Yes, exactly. That's right.
Thank you.